Hello and welcome to today's draft review of T1 vs Damwon Kia. Team 7 of T1 will face its first major opponent after the 4-0 score against the bottom teams, but going right into it with game number 1. In the ban phase we see Udyr, Rel and Kai'Sa, so well with Rel having high priority globally, the ban does make quite a lot of sense, the other two are a bit more situational. On the other side, Seraphine, Renekton and Thresh. T1 doesn't really play Seraphine, so that ban makes little sense, the other two are quite solid though. First pick Lilia, a great pick overall, as she can be played in different styles and is the only and strongest AP jungler at the moment. Senna and Kayn are the rotation for Damwon Kia. Senna, a good pick for Ghost personally, and Kayn, well, that's Canyon's answer. Versus Lilia, has a bit of a weaker early game of course, but scales nicely and then later on can obviously threaten her very much. Camille and Aurelia are the duo lanes for T1 here, both of them blind, while there are picks which the players, especially closer here, can play to a great extent, blinding them both, and as they are your crucial solo lanes, is neither a smart nor a great idea, considering the amount of potential counters that Damwon can now elect. One of them being the Sion for Khan in the top lane, super fine versus the Camille, early on of course, and then later with the ability to hold the line in a potential split burst scenario, and his engage obviously also quite nice against, well, this champion that T1 has in sense of a gank assistant for Kayn. In the second ban phase we see Azir and Nautilus, Azir being a fine mid laner into the Aurelia in some capacity, so that does make some sense, and Alistair Ezreal banning a weak and a very strong side bot lane away from Teddy, who is kind of famous for both of them in a different variety. Victor then being elected for Showmaker, versus Aurelia a safer option as he is in many cases. For example, we talked about it last time versus Solution, but of course this is not a 100% safe pick, so he has to be careful, and in the later stages his space control with his W and ultimate will absolutely help massively against the squishier and short range champions T1 already has elected here. T1 answering with Lucian Yuumi, T1 here doubling down with early aggression in these bot lane matchup here as well. Lucian obviously not that great of a bot laner, he is still powerful early on, and with Yuumi his mid game transition can be quite effective. Having Carrier though, the main engage and playmaker of T1 on Yuumi is highly questionable, and now with all picks elected, who will block the Sion ult or check bushes? It's obvious that T1 has only one direction, which is forward, and if they should ever fall behind or even be on even footing at later stages in the game, they have already lost the game. There is little ability to play around, and unless there are massive blunders from Damwon Kia's side, T1's comp has nearly no comeback abilities. Rounding up Damwon Kia's side here with Maokai, which is absolutely perfect here. His lockdown not only in bot lane but also in team fights, and even more so his ultimate will absolutely decimate T1. There's, as I mentioned, no one that can block the root of his ultimate, so it will go straight to at least one nice target for Damwon to blow up. And for Beryl personally, this is not a new pick. In the Casper Cup he played this champion over and over again, so that's a trademark champion that T1 should have been aware of, and it's very, very effective here. And T1, as I mentioned, they have a very, very short and early game team comp here. They really rely on the snowball, otherwise, as I mentioned, there's really no comeback, they can't face check, and overall they have very little reliable DPS, again due to the short range, so even in the team fights and damage wise they will have some issues, especially against the immortal Sion. And Damwon Kia on the other side, they have everything they want. Scaling, nice team fighting, comfort champions. So they can punish mistakes from T1, but to be honest, they don't even really need to do that. As long as they are on an even or even ahead footing in the 25th to 20th minute mark, they are completely fine and will win the game regardless. And well, that's not really what happened. T1 here fast delivery with the Turbo Int, one of the fastest games if you wanted that, as they lost the game in just 3 minutes. A very poor performance from nearly everyone on their roster, and Damwon Kia not really playing too amazing on their side, but the very young T1 roster surely is very tilted after these "I will prove that I'm so great" playstyle with all these unnecessary flashes into the enemy towers over and over again. Coming to game number 2 now, with the ban phase Renekton, Thresh, Irelia, so banning Closer's Irelia here for like more of a comedic effect after the disaster that was game number 1. The other bans keeping the same. On the other side, T1, Udyr, Rel, Kai'Sa. Even on red side, they continue with the same bans, which this time leaves something open, and that is the Seraphine. T1 does not play it strangely, just another detriment of the, let's call it, dumpster fire that is probably going on behind the scenes of this team. Here Damwon Kia is getting their hands on this rather OP pick. T1 on the other side going back to the Lucian, this time probably into the mid lane, as Teddy, while he was really trying, was not really able to make the pick work that much. Lilia again for Oner had been quite okay. His playing was also more poorly, as were the playstyle of all the rookies in game number 1. Canyon again with the confidence of his Kayn alongside the Ezreal here. Seemingly they want to contest T1 in their top side pressure in getting this weak side AD carry if the Seraphine should go bot lane, that is. Senna then lastly in the first half, this time for Teddy here, a bit more of an insurance, and also versus the Ezreal it's quite a good laning matchup. In the next ban phase, Kalista and Nara, so the Kalista ban here a bit questionable as both AD carries for the teams have been elected, so maybe they believe that Senna Kalista is a lane that could exist, which I don't really think so. On the other side, Azir again, this time with the Gragas. T1 here failing again to ban the Sion, who again looks quite great versus the 2 AD carries and most likely an AD top, and he will again be invincible. Camille then picked up for Zeus again. While his mechanics were not that bad, unlike others, he was also suffering. So here with the same matchup, most likely he must have a lot of confidence if he's willing to return into this matchup. And Sion as obviously, picked up for Khan. It's, as I mentioned, very effective versus the T1 setup, and alongside this time is the Syndra, who unlike the Victor can blow up the Lucian more easily, but her early lane is way more difficult to manage. So while the pick can be a bit more effective in the mid game than the Victor, she doesn't offer the same space control and early on is a bit harder to play. Lastly, rounding T1's comp up is the Nautilus, so this time they are getting a playmaker and they're getting engage and frontline all in all with this one diver here for carrier. And Damwon Kia with a few changes from game number 1. They still look to hold on versus T1 and then come back strong with an even stronger game state in the mid and late game. T1 on the other side with a better setup now in the bot lane. They have more forgiving time down there, but considering that this Team 7's power was coming greatly from the bot lane, to give them such a more defensive matchup is a bit strange. And even stranger is that when they play around the bot line in terms of skirmishing, they do have the abilities, but still they're not really in a position of power down there to considerably initiate these skirmishes. And considering also the early levels and the early lane dynamics, these skirmishes would only be in their favor after the 9th or 11th minute. T1 here in this game, they're able to win the coin toss, and with Damwon Kia being in some cases overconfident and handshaking some of the moves T1 made, and obviously Oner with the massive pop-off performance, he has slowly become one of the more consistent players and parts of this Team 7 of T1. T1 is able to equalize the series score with 1-1, getting us a game number 3. In this game number 3, T1 here, Udyr, Senna, Kai'Sa, now self-banning the Senna instead of the Rel, which is a bit strange considering that Teddy was having a good game on her. On the other side, Lilia, Renekton, Thresh, so Damwon Kia adapting here with the Lilia over the Irelia ban, taking Oner's power pick from him. And by the way, I just have to mention it again here. You notice how effective the Thresh ban is. It's really double effective here in all of the 3 major ban phases. And I, who always advocates for this ban instead of the silly Aphelios ban, I'm really happy with Damwon Kia's adaptation in this ban particular here. Rel, as she is open, is being here first picked for carrier. Obviously Seraphine is also open, and T1 again not picking her, but Rel for carrier quite good, she's fitting with his playstyle, and overall the bot side focus that T1 shows in their games regularly. Alistar Nidalee is the rotation for Damwon Kia here. The Alistar somewhat of a counter to Rel in their spell interactions. He has some priority in some cases, but it's not a massive advantage as she can also answer his engage in certain cases. The Nidalee for Canyon still doesn't change the pick, doesn't change the fact that she's quite a poor choice. With Lilia banned, she is the most popular AP jungler here. Doesn't change that she's not really the greatest of elections in this case. Graves Samira for T1 here, the rotation. Graves obviously going into the jungle in Oner's hands. Quite great into Nidalee, and even though the pick has fallen a bit out of favor, his power should not be underestimated should he get just the tiniest of snacks early on. And while you know I dislike Samira, with Rel her, I have to admit that's the best lane setup she can get, but already versus the Alistar, not looking too great at all, and it already puts heavy emphasis on snowballing for her to be relevant at all. Rounding up the first half here with the Xayah pick, it's the answer that Teddy himself has pushed into popularity really, the Xayah into the Samira, and with the Alistar they're super safe, a million times more reliable. Combining that with the red side terrain, Damwon Kia's bot lane is safer than Fort Knox, just really good in case of turning away T1's aggression down there. In the next ban phase, Azir and Sion. Now finally the Sion is being banned from T1, with the Azir another indicator for maybe a Lucian pickup, as he's doing quite fine into him. Remembering that Graves has been elected though, is more realistic that T1 is looking for a short range mid laner, and additionally obviously maybe it's also that they fear that Azir could do some mean things to Graves Samira, who are obviously quite susceptible to his kit. Ori, Orianna and Gnar are the bans on the other side. Orianna could be one of these potential mid laners here in the AP department that is also somewhat good with Graves. It's not the best option in my opinion here, but overall a decent ban. Seraphine here has fallen to the bottom of the draft, very questionable for both teams in terms of priority, but now elected for Damwon Kia in the mid lane this time, as the Alistar obviously has been elected for Beryl. Ryze now for closer. He can do just a tiny bit for Graves honestly, and considering that T1 is not really playing around closer too much, only for a limited amount, so the Ryze wants to roam to the bot lane in most cases, which is also questionable as he's not really that great into the Xayah and the Alistar, and versus the Seraphine in the 1v1 matchup in the mid lane is also far from great. Camille here a third time for Zeus, now finally not versus a Sion, but still Camille blind again. He has been playing good on her, but lastly rounding up Damwon Kia's side of the draft, GP for Khan. Now he's not on a tank once in his lifetime, but still he has a great laning phase for the first 9 to 10 minutes. After the first item, the matchup turns somewhat. Later with his ult, he will completely, shit on T1 split push. And also against the desperate bot lane plays that T1 will most likely try, his ultimate can further deter them from diving and further turn the dives around in Damwon's favor. Theoretically, obviously, the Ryze could roam into the top lane, and then the GP has quite an issue against the Ryze Camille, but excluding one or two moments in the last 8 or so games, no one is really helping Zeus too much in the top lane, and T1 always going for the bot lane aggression, which is understandable considering their bot lane power level. T1 here now with a slower comp that doesn't want to teamfight all that much, and it's honestly all over the place. Samira wants to snowball while the other solo lanes and Graves to some extent want to form up and scale. Their most likely target this time again is the bot lane, but as I mentioned, there are just so many things in their way, and again not much of a front line, which is even worse when the solo laners are split pushing, and T1 can't really force any position or engage without the flash usage. It's just again all over the place in many different aspects, and most likely was done in some isolation, right? Everyone picks for himself, that's what it feels like, but even then they don't pick winning lanes in particular. Damwon Kia here with an easier comp, good wave clear, good scaling again, they can just wait and defend from the incoming attacks, especially with their protection they build up in the bot lane there, and then give them some time. And in an even game state, the Alistar, well, being the only engaged source with Seraphine follow-up, is just way more than T1 has and honestly can handle. With this they can force the fights in the 5 vs 3 situations, while T1 is using their solo laners in a split push, because obviously both of them aren't really that great in fights, and as I mentioned, T1's overall structure of a team fight is very, very poor. This results in Damwon Kia's win. Again, Damwon Kia not playing especially great League of Legends, but with the draft lead they were able to punish multiple grave mistakes of T1, and then later on denying the split push with the different tools in their kit. They win the series now 2-1. That's it for today. T1 here, even though the draft's endgame play was quite subpar, they get a dominant game 2 win and at least only lose 1 point in the standings. The play was very volatile and very independent, and if Damwon Kia had a better day, the results would even be more brutal in my opinion. Positive things though, that in all games Oner has looked quite stable and even great at times. The rest of the team was having many issues, the bot lane not really getting the great lane setups and then the great leads. And if you have read any comments online and you know how the mid lane turned out and was evaluated, on paper the 2-1 versus the world champion is good, but as this is already round 2 and in terms of fundamentals the roster still looks very messy, and then actually there aren't many games left till the potential playoffs, which is like 6 series, so maximum of 18 more games. And the question is now that this roster has lost, will a team 8 come out and how will that look like? So if you follow me on Twitter you might have already read my take on that, so you might want to check that out. Thanks for watching though, wish you all a great day, till next time, bye.